Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and today I want to talk about my Meet Me in the Middle minions. This video was requested by Jeremy L. and will feature cards that have low floors and high ceilings. They can be terrible, or they can be great. These types of minions are unpredictable in a game where predictability is your friend. Upside is always great, but there is always a place for minions that are consistent, even if unspectacular. Thus, I wish these cards would be closer to the middle in terms of execution. The highs are great, but the lows can be crushing. For these cards to make the list, the card needs to have potential to be bad, misplayed, or otherwise detrimental to its faction. But there should also be circumstances that are overlooked or situational that make the card significantly improved. Some cards have low floors. It doesn't mean that they have high ceilings. Sorry, Griselda. Of course, Poo Pox is going to be on this list. It's really hard to have a lower floor than losing a VP. I have personally never used this ability, nor seen it used, but others have. Some of our viewers swear by Poo Pox. One of our viewers, Gian Piero Giacomini, has used this ability multiple times, which is why I've crowned him the king of the Poo Pox. And I do see the potential there, I just haven't needed it. Poo Pox lets you draw 3 cards and play one of them as an extra card, but it costs the VP, a VP you cannot get back. Therefore, it is a desperation play, one fraught with risk. But it may be a necessity to close a base. To make sure this works, you need to know what will be among the 3 cards, and Space Knight can help with that. You'll know at least 2 of the 3 cards, possibly all 3, and this should create a deterministic play that will let you close and win a base. I could foresee this being used once per game. Any more than that, and I think something else is going wrong because the Astronauts are strong. So the floor is low, but there is also potential to be a base stealer. Betrothed also has a pretty low floor. Not only is it just 3 power, but it's not necessarily your 3 power. Betrothed requires you to bet on the winner, which is not a guarantee in multiplayer. It's also possible that you'd end up getting more points if you just kept control and put that power towards your own lead. I think Betrothed is commonly misplayed. The card lets you give away control itself, but I rarely find that to be a good idea. It reduces your candidate list for other ignoble benefits, and you always have time to give away control. It's sometimes tempting to double up on Betrothed on the same base, but in that case you are letting your opponent get the same VP since most bases have a 2-point split from second. But if you target a 4-3-2 base, you'd be maximizing your own points by doubling up, and it's awesome on ninja bases. If you could find the right base opportunity, using repaying debts on a Betrothed to play another Betrothed, using that minion's on-play ability to give away control may be well worth it. Particularly with the hill that strolls, knowing precisely when to keep the power determines the success of the minion, but so does creating your own opportunity. Mr. Grumpers is among the worst minions for breaking a base. It forces a minion to lose 2 power, and if all minions are on the same base, then there is no net change in power. It's a terrible minion to start on a base because it doesn't provide value by itself. And with Muffin being a primary base finisher, you don't have very many mid-game minions. That is a pretty low floor. But Mr. Grumpers is also a key cog in the Kitty Cat's engine if you can pull it off. He puts most minions into range of Queen Fluffy, which means Whiskers can destroy them. But there are some other crazy plays where Mr. Grumpers excels, such as action-based destruction. It can put someone into Seeing Stars range, and if a minion needs Mr. Grumpers to be destroyed, it means it is worthy of being destroyed. I like the elegance of lowering someone into Plutonium Dragon range since the ability happens before the power reduction expires, and you can create a repeatable combo with Critter Champion and Mr. Grumpers that feeds into the other 2 Kitty Cat minions. Alone, Mr. Grumpers does nothing, but as part of an engine, he's fantastic. It's just hard to get all those cards aligned at the same time. The Howlers are hard to use because they are your primary base finishers at a class where you usually lead. This means that they are either wasted prematurely or stay in your hand, but it is so easy to play extra minions of power 2, and when you can, the Howlers are amazing. They make a great Blossom play, and they are an extremely above average sidekick. They tear through the homeworld. There are too many examples to name. I really like burying them as they get the power on the turn they are uncovered, not buried. Proper Howler usage is the key to werewolf strategies, and they have a lot of hidden potential, but I do wish there were more opportunities to use them mid-game other than prepping chew toys. You do have 4 of them, however. On the surface, the Haunting doesn't seem to have a low floor because it's such a great minion, but it has below average power for its class and requires extreme tactics in order to activate its value. And yet, ghosts are played incorrectly so often because players keep their hand sizes routinely low, which means that the haunting is actively hurting a player by trying to remain invulnerable at all times. If the haunting is 6 on someone else's turn, most likely you did something wrong. But if you know how to activate ghost powers instead of persisting them, the haunting is great because it becomes a free +3 power that coincides with your normal plays. It allows for multiple base attacks since the ghosts do not draw back up until the end of scoring. When combined with Spectre and Door to the Beyond, you can maximize your burst potential instead of being at the mercy of what cards you draw. It would be nice if haunting allowed even just one more card in your hand, as it would be so much more accessible for newer players. The Elf Help Guru has a definitively low floor since it exclusively helps your opponents. But that is the point. You need a reason to do so, and it isn't always apparent. The Elf Help Guru helps you lose bases you are already intending to lose without committing more resources. It helps close the base so that a player with destruction doesn't get another turn to kick you off. It can also push someone else's minion into love overload territory, and because they all get the power, you can create some crazy tie scenarios where all minions get taken out. I've even used this to create temporary power so that my fledgling vampires can get power counters when a base is not close to breaking. The Elf Help Guru is a great counter to Rhodes Plaza Mall, the base where power really doesn't matter. On ninja bases, after you pull an Elf Help Guru using Runaway and steal their largest minion, you can increase the gap further. I love the elves because of their unconventional playbook, and they can be quite strong when you recognize an elven situation. They just aren't always apparent because they are so unconventional, and it contributes to the low floor. The locals floor is considerable. You are placing potentially 3 good cards on the bottom of your deck. But consider this, you have 10 locals. If you commit to playing them all, you will look at 30 cards. You will draw 2 cards every turn. At some point, you can start counting and knowing what cards are in your deck, assuming you don't reshuffle. And if you admit that good cards can always be shuffled to the bottom of your deck at the start of the game, what you actually get is a faction that draws about 5 extra cards or more, which is significant. This can actually ensure that you get to your good cards eventually. They don't have a lot of average pairings, but they do have quite a few exceptional pairings. As my final minion, Sprouts can actually be terrible. You have 4 of them, and they can get minions of power 3. The Venus Mantrap can pull out your 2s. So not counting your 4 Sprouts, the Sprouts typically have 10 targets, 6 of which are power 3, some of which will be drawn and played. Venus Mantrap will play others, and probably not Sprouts because they are too slow. As a result, the Sprouts can run out of targets and will die without doing anything because the destruction is mandatory. But the extra play is not linked to the destruction, so if it can survive, you can quickly pull minions every turn. Also, if your Sprouts run out of targets, it might mean that you are close to a recycle, in which case Sprouts will become very powerful again. It's all about managing your deck appropriately and knowing when to reserve Sprouts for round 2. I'd love it if the destruction were optional like Mild-Mannered Citizen, because the mandatory nature makes them more difficult to use. But minions aren't the only cards that suffer this fate. For example, look at the Giant Ants. The Giant Ants are all about adding power counters, which is why Who Wants to Live Forever seems out of place. Power counters are what justify their below average power, and this card comes across as weaker than Sacrifice because it cannot exploit indestructible minions. However, the Giant Ants need the right collection of cards for their engine to work, so they do desire card draw. And with the Kung Fu Fighters, one of their best pairings, they actually have a reason to remove counters because the Kung Fu Fighters can regenerate them. Drunken Master wants to be a battery, and removing the counter from Lady Whirlwind gives you another destruction. The counter you remove doesn't even have to be yours originally. There are also cards that replenish that power by turning cards into power counters. I haven't done this personally, but you could use this as a means to cycle through your deck to get to your specials, just converting counters to cards to counters again. Even Titans can have this problem. In my group, several members feel that rainbarak is the weakest Big in Japan Titan because of its chicken and egg problem. You have to win a base to unleash it, but Titans are supposed to help you win bases. So what comes first? You can use evolution, but it costs the minion's life and an action play, whereas other Titans can be summoned by actions and give immediate power. Rainbarak only grows in power in specific situations. You can only shuffle in minions of power 2, the minions you'd be least likely to recur outside of itty critters. However, Rainbarak is also a mobile titan. You can use this ability to avoid adding too much power on a base since the movement is linked to shuffling, and it's optional so you don't always have to move it, and it's not timing based like Major Ursa. But I have to give credit to John Pirro again for starting a pretty intense debate that shows another aspect of Rainbarak's power. It doesn't gain power once per turn, it's once per base per turn. If Rainbarak moves, the new base becomes a new trigger, and Rainbarak can double in power counter output per turn. This means using the critter champion to get power on one base, while also getting power on a separate base you are targeting. And for factions that rely heavily on 2s, you will love the recursion. I think Rainbarak can surprise people if you have the right pairing and utilize its movement properly. As you can see, the floor of a card doesn't take away from its ceiling. I do wish that these cards were a bit more flexible, narrowing the extremes on both ends, because it would make these factions more accessible to new players. Of the factions mentioned, probably only the Astroknights are worth giving to new players. I tried to give new players kitty cats, but they played them wrong extensively. Yet these factions can compete when these cards have their true power unlocked, so there is always hope. There are times when it's good to hover on both extremes, and there are times when predictability is best. It really just depends on your playstyle and how much you are willing to work to swing potential to the right. Do you have any other Meet Me in the Middle minions? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down.